There we go. Here we are. Hello, everybody. Good Monday morning to you. Welcome to Win Your Week, Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy. Take two. Take two. I'm telling you, it is the magic. It is the power of live streaming. I'm telling you what, it's one of those mediums that you love and that you hate, but it's more love than hate. So anyway, we are here and we're excited. We have an amazing show. Honestly, today I actually have my very first guest on Win Your Week with Steve Worthy. So I'm actually looking forward to this conversation. Hello, Florence. I see you over there, YouTube. Yes, take two. Good morning. Good to see you here. And we are actually live, good to go on LinkedIn and also on Facebook as well. So here's the conversation that we want to take place today. It's gonna be extremely organic. But one of the things that as I have kind of gone through my career and also helped people kind of move through their career has always been around this situation around assessments. Like what's the value of an assessment? 360 assessments, disc assessments, Myers Briggs, which is super popular over here in the states. All those different things, right? What's the value that they add to the individual, but also to the company? But more importantly, how do we actually take the information from these assessments and actually have a conversation that's going to be beneficial to the leader in their development, in their growth, which over time actually impacts the overall organization as well. So here we go. So my guest today is Per-Erik Camacho. I'm super thrilled. He's a visionary leader who's honestly fundamentally transforming the landscape of talent management. As the founder and CEO of RealityCheck, he's bringing over 9 years of rich experience in leadership development and championing a new and, dare I say, overdue approach to feedback through the creation of the most empathetic 360-degree experience today. So we are going to be talking to Per-Erik Camacho. Everybody, welcome, Mister. I like your last name. Welcome, Mr. Camacho, to the stage. You know.
Thank you so much, Steve. I like my
How are you
last name
doing?
too.
Yeah, yeah. It's the because we're both of a certain vintage. We're not going to say age, but I'm just thinking of the boxer, right? Like the Macho Camacho, right? And so I don't know if you remember
Mm.
him or not, but he was a no. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. That's gonna be homework number one for you after you get after you
Thank you.
get off the very very popular boxer over here in the states. So here we go. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us today. Before we move into um, the questions that I have in the kind of direction that we're going to go. Could you just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we're going to move into some conversations.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for having me on your podcast. I'm delighted to be your first guest. We've had some good conversations, and I'm very happy to be recording and to sharing some of that with your audience. Well, I used to have Sweden's most Swedish name, Per-Erik person, but I didn't feel that really kind of described me well or made justice to my Colombian heritage. So just a few months ago, I actually changed my last name to my grandfather's, the late Salustiano Camacho. I love him so much. So now I'm a strange mix. I think I'm unique in the world with this name, actually. Very strange combination, but I'm proud. Swedish
Yeah,
Colombian.
yeah, Swedish. You beat me to it. I was literally gonna say that. I was literally gonna say that. That's awesome. I don't think I even knew that. That's actually really cool. I'm glad we talked about that a little bit too. So now you actually do have another reason to actually go back and actually look up the name as well to Mr. Hector Macho Camacho as well. You know,
Mm.
we have had several conversations, and interestingly enough, right? I send over this list of questions and kind of the directions that or direction that we're gonna potentially go in, and then we do a pre audio and video check, and then boom, we start having a conversation, and the entire direction starts to change again, right? We have
Yeah.
this conversation, and we're talking about we're talking about this idea of approval, right? Seeking approval. We will get into everyone who's listening. We will get into the ideas around 360 assessments and all that stuff, and then of course move into 360. Excuse me, move into reality check. But um, I wanted to open up this conversation with a little kind of a behind the scenes peek for everybody who didn't get an opportunity. We were talking about just seeking approval. I posted something earlier this weekend about you know, it was my birthday and I was missing my parents, and how you and I we were talking in the context of like, even as an adult, I am still seeking like their approval, like in their their approval, like what I'm doing and the direction I'm going. And we started having this conversation around leaders and that seeking approval in yourself, and that in certain instances. Could you talk a little bit about that, and then share your story that you were going to mention about your grandfather?
Yeah, thanks for your personal post this weekend and for bringing that up. How we seek approval, because obviously I think all humans seek approval, and it's a big part of reality check actually. What would happen if you were given that approval?
Mm,
Because we seek it endlessly, and we might get it, we might not. And I grew up very close to my father. He's still alive. And he's yeah, worried about me a lot. He knows about my latest assignment, and yeah, but he always comes back to me saying, "Talk to them about feedback. Talk to them about the importance of feedback."
mm,
And when I grew up, he always made reference to this letter. There's we used to joke that if his house burns down, the only thing he will save is this letter. And I've heard about that letter hundreds of times, to the point where you, as a kid, you're like, yeah, yeah, Dad, I know about the letter, I know about the letter. But what's this letter about? He, as a young adult, he was probably in his 20s, early, yeah, 20s definitely. mid-20s, and he was working as a mechanic on a big oil tanker. And well, he seemed to enjoy that time of his life. He has many stories around that. But the story about the letter comes from his, at that time, his superior. He was an elderly man who, at some point later in his career, sat down very lonely in his apartment in Stockholm and wrote my dad a letter. And I've read this letter many times. It's quite short. And there's one sentence in that letter which my father cherishes as the most important recognition, like the biggest sign of approval that he was good enough, that he was worthy, he was valuable to another individual. It's a very nice letter in every way, and it's not that profound, but it had a profound impact on my father. Whenever he would doubt himself, and that would be often, I mean, as professionals, and he was a leader and a manager as well, he would always come back to kind of that reassuring letter and those words that were in there, that someone during his career saw him, saw the value he provided. And that gave him so much, I don't know, comfort, strength, direction. And to me, when I started working with leaders, and I obviously quickly understood that feedback is important, and I could see how little feedback we get. And I started telling this story about my father, and I said, isn't it sad that that's the only thing he has after a successful career, 30, 40 years working? All he has left is one letter. What if he could have had such experiences a little bit more often? People coming to him, kind of verifying him, saying, hey, Johnny, because that's his name, we really appreciate the work you're doing, the effort. Because he would come home, and I guess much like many other fathers and mothers for that sake, and he would not be sure if he was good enough. He came home, and he came home with a burden still, like needing to provide, not sure if he'd been good enough that day. Did he provide as much as he could have for his team? Did people respect him and listen to his advice? And that's kind of the key experience that I want to change with RealityCheck. I want to give people that gift of, to be seen and to be fully supported throughout your career, and continuously given that feedback. Because a lot of managers, they worry so much about this feedback report. They're like, ooh, that's a good idea, but I don't know if I dare. And then I try to convince them, and I try to, ensure them that it's going to be good. And I always tell them, 9 out of 10, probably even more, probably like 98 out of 100, get a much more positive feedback or review than they expect. So if we let that sink in, that means we have a lot of people out there doing a really good job, but they worry they're not good enough. And what happens in that moment when you realize that you are beyond good enough? You're actually appreciated, you're valued, you make a difference. I think people's performance, because this is ultimately what companies are about, unleashing performance, great performance. I think people's performance immediately change from that moment where they feel valued and they're, ensured, and they're just, I'm here, I'm appreciated, let's do this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, dude. Why are you trying to make me cry with your story about your grandfather? Like you got me over here like all of my emotions this morning. This is like we're supposed to be starting off strong and all business and professional on Monday morning. You got us feeling all emotional, guy. Come on now. Come on.
That's what you get when you talk to a Swedish Colombian. I'm a mixed man. And I'm all about emotions.
Yeah,
Because really, that's, you know,
yeah. There's
that's
so
why it's called
much.
the most empathetic
Yeah.
feedback report, because feedback is potentially harmful. It's potentially stress.
Mm,
And I know you have a lot of great questions, and we're going to get to that. But to remind ourselves about the mindset, why are we doing assessments? What's the
mm-hmm,
point of
mm-hmm,
them?
mm-hmm,
Are
mm-hmm,
we trying to identify who are the top performers? Who should we, give all our resources? Who should we trust? I believe all people have a tremendous capacity, and something is flawed in our way of doing assessments. We see this from an early stage. Both you and I, we love football,
mm-hmm.
the European one, if I dare say so, on this day of after the Super Bowl. Um, and things are changing there in terms of atmosphere, how managers and clubs are understanding the kind of culture you need to have in place for performance and top performance to happen. There are leagues, junior leagues in Sweden now, where they're not allowed to count points anymore, because they see that really it's not about winning in an early age. It's
Mm,
really about having fun. So how can we shift the perspectives there? And also when it comes to workplaces, there's a lot of competition out there. Companies are doing probably a good job, but still they're creating competitions like Great Place to Work, where you compete with each other. And I don't think necessarily that we should compete about performance, because
mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
complicated. And who's to say that you're a better manager than I am if we're not leading the same people? We're not leading during the same challenges. We don't have the same kind of foundations or the circumstances. But everyone can thrive if they're given the right kind of support and resources. And
Mm-hmm.
that's some of what I saw was missing from the traditional 360 feedback reports.
Oh gosh, there's so many things. So many areas that I want to go into. One of the things that I sort of latched onto was this idea that when when someone gets their feedback, they're actually doing a lot better than they had anticipated, right? They actually their score or feedback or commentary, qualitative or quantitative that they receive, they're actually doing a lot better than they anticipate. And so I to your point around your grandfather, I I I hazard the guess that can imagine if this person was receiving that feedback consistently over their career and how much further along they would be. What is the issue? What's the gap though? Because while we can talk about the merits of feedback, it's just still not happening, and it's still not happening in a very constructive and consistent way. Because I think there's a lot of subjectivity associated with it. Rather than from an objective standpoint. And when I used to talk to my teams about feedback, I would always talk about the body of work, not that one instance where Per-Erik had an issue with a customer or with a team member, and that one inch issue define Per-Erik's entire career. And I think we still have a lot of that going on. What say you just around the idea that there's just a lot of inconsistencies in around delivering feedback and what that looks like?
There sure is. I've been taught that American companies are better at having procedures as the 360 feedback assessment done annually. In Sweden, we don't have that at all,
Mm,
actually. It's a surprise to many people who come from, with experience working in American companies. And I actually grateful to have had a colleague who just had that experience. And he said it was a shock to come back to Sweden and realize that he was not given a 360 report. And it's like, but how am I to know where I should focus my own development right now? When am I to receive all that feedback from my team that I know I need, from my colleagues, from my superior? It's like we take it for granted. It's like, well, it should be coming in the flow of work. Yeah, but what if
mm,
it's not? And as you say, it's not coming enough. We know that. And I think there are a lot of things going in there, and you could be worried right now since people are also more and more afraid, it seems, from face-to-face conversations. We're giving feedback and reviews all the time. Google is asking us if we've been to that restaurant, how did we like it? We're giving a lot of that, but we're not having the face-to-face conversations. It's more convenient to put things in an app than to actually tell the owner of a restaurant your opinion. And I see a lot of that in Sweden as well, even though we're seen as a fairly non-hierarchical culture, we're also quite indirect in our communication. And it's a real issue. It sure is, because people are suffering. I'm sure I've heard countless examples of people who, not until they are leaving the company, people show up to them and tell them how much they appreciate them. And they're like, whoa, if I knew this, I might have stayed.
Right.
And if you consider that from a business owner perspective, it's a tragedy, because you're losing your best people because they feel they're just taking advantage of, and they're taking them for granted, much like in any personal relationship where two people love each other, but they just fail to recognize the value of the other person. And slowly they just shift apart.
Yeah, and they shift apart, and that's it's a very sad situation because one of the things that you and I have been talking about the book that I'm writing, but then around the idea around approachability, right? The core of that perspective of around approachability is it's the difference between being informed versus finding out, right? And so when you think about how much more impact I could have if I was informed instead of actually at the tail end having to find out. Now I'm finding out that Per-Erik he wants to leave, or he's already left, or rather than being informed and like, okay, 2 months before Per-Erik is thinking about leaving, he's having a conversation with me, right? Because there is this measure of like of empathy and connection, and I really want actually to continue to work with this company. There's a relationship there. One of the things that we see, and I don't know, I'm not sure if you see this over where you are, but even in corporations, I call them the gatekeepers of the feedback, and typically it's human resources. I'm sorry about all the human resource people that are going to be on this call, and I apologize up front, but you know who you are, so I'm not upset. I don't have any human resource people as clients. I'm okay. So, but I feel in organizations there are gatekeepers of those performance reviews and that assessment. Do you see any of that actually being a hindrance to that transference
Mm.
of knowledge between the feedback and the person that needs to receive that feedback?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because it got me thinking. One discovery I made while I was doing research for RealityCheck, I was comparing to different platforms, trying to figure out what is missing, what do I need to include to at least be seen as having a minimal viable product. And what I saw was exactly what you're describing from a tech point of view, where a lot of the functionalities that some of the other solutions have focused on is all about internal politics, gatekeeping. It's like, who should be informed? How can we decide who should be able to read this or not? There's just a lot of administration around this, because obviously, well, from one perspective, I can understand it's sensible information, but it's also has to do with the mindset around this. How are we using this?
Yes.
If we're using this to grade people,
Yes.
to take informed decisions about who to fire or not, I think we're wrong. We should. I come from a perspective of leadership and development. It's always, you're either in development or you should be leaving. And my job as a coach is never to tell a business owner who to fire. I'm telling them, what resource do you need to put in place, who is coachable and who is not. If you're not coachable, if you're not listening to feedback in this case. If you're not listening to your colleagues and not accepting that you're not meeting their expectations right now, you are in the wrong place. So you need to get back into the right place, the right mindset, or you might have to develop, maybe it was a wrong fit from the beginning, but again, that comes down to the business owner or the manager in place. I think most people can succeed if you're just given the right circumstances. And the reality check is about that. I wanted to change the name from 360 feedback because 360 is just a very technical word. It's something we can use within the business because we know what you're talking about. But anyone's like 360 what? 360 clients, are they invited? My family invited? Who's invited in 360? Who's included? Man, I don't know. But a reality check, we can understand what is that, because there's been a big focus on agile processes last 10 years or so. And to me, that is really what reality check is about, is to be in contact with reality more often. Before you can make long plans and you can have an idea about what you will do in 2-3 years. But today we know the world is moving so fast, we need to adapt faster. And how can you adapt? Well, you come in contact, you get a reality check. You can get a reality check from many different stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I get many from my kids. Those are tough ones, but they hold you accountable,
Right.
and that's what a great reality check do. So I wanted to design something that was more focused on development and less on internal politics and gatekeeping. So we don't have any of that functionality. But what we do have is a very empathic approach to feedback, understanding you need to ask high quality questions, but beyond the questions and all the data that you're gathering through this feedback form, it's a lot about how you understand performance and how you need to deliver the analysis for that data to turn into something actionable and potentially motivating. Because it's not necessarily motivating to understand all the different aspects of leadership where I fail. I don't want people to have that kind of experience. I often worry as a leadership consultant coming in that people will leave the room feeling informed, somewhat motivated, but also very overwhelmed with everything they now need to focus on. I don't think that is necessarily an empathic delivery of that feedback. And I see that when you get a report that is dense, 25 pages, we can do that, But that is overwhelming. That's not nice. It's not empathic. I want to be able to direct you to, from all of these 25 pages, I've read them, and I've used my 10 years of experience and my 5 years of studies and, whatnot to help you identify what are the first steps and how could you specifically address this question, and what is the meaningful conversation you need to have with whom to move forward.
Yeah, it's almost like the 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 assessment, the results of the assessment trump the conversations that need to have that need to take place. It's almost like they want to generate all of this data. It's almost like a lot of times these assessments are almost like CYA, it's like cover your ass type of assessments, and in the context of like, I covered everything. I covered every little single thing, so that way we should be safe, right? That's that we're once we're safe, okay, now we're good to go. But I love what you said, because you and I actually had this conversation, because I know we're working on something, for approachability. One of the things you said to me, you said, Steve, it's honestly about the conversations that actually take place after you get the results, right? It's not so much the results themselves, it's the conversation. And I think the issue is, and let me know if you agree with me or not. I just think the issue is that a lot of people just don't know how to have those conversations. They just don't. They rely so heavily on the data, and they just don't have the ability to have that conversation. So when a person gets the reality check, I'm sure that you actually help and walk them through having to have those conversations. But even with those 360 assessments, I mean, I've sat through some of the conversations afterwards. I'm like, that was not helpful. Like, that was 100% not helpful. All you did was, it's almost like a person giving a PowerPoint presentation, and all they do is read the slides, right? Which I can't, which I hate. I'm sorry, hate's a strong word, but I just do. And it's very similar. Like, they don't have the ability to have a conversation. So, what say you once again about this idea around making sure that people have the ability to have a conversation?
That is a key point. I mean, what if our managers and leaders are, maybe that is one of the competences
Mm,
that we should really focus on right now, to have the competence to have vulnerable conversations. Obviously, we try to do our best there, but I think this is where you find the limits of a tool. I sometimes think about that. How smart should we build this tool?
mm,
Because we could add an AI. We probably would build an AI around it at some point. But what should that AI be focused on? Because what if it's so smart that you don't have to have the conversation anymore?
mm.
And I think we lose something there. If our tools become too smart and they help us avoid that kind of contact, what are we building? What kind of a society are we building?
Right.
To me, one of the main reasons I became a consultant was that I took part in a training that had a fundamental impact on me, because it showed me what happens when you build trust.
Mm-hmm.
You can have two individuals working side by side, and their vision for the future and for how humanity should go on and how we should collaborate will be very different whether they have trust in each other or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you at some point have been able to build trust with another human being, everything changes. But it changes through these meaningful conversations
Correct. Correct.
where we don't know what's going to come out of them. It's going through my colleague, maybe, if that's what's been identified by the RealityCheck. And just, I write scripts. I actually go that far in what we provide as a value, because it's not about the data.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. The data would just direct me to, okay, you need to have a conversation with your colleague about exactly this. And here is a way that you could do that. And I would have digested then all the comments they had, all the background that I've been gathering in this project. And I tell the companies, this is a 3-year project to
Mm.
get started, because there will be spin-offs where you will actually need to practice having vulnerable conversations. I have a great friend, maybe he will be one of your guests someday. I'm more than happy to direct you to him. And there are tools for that. There are people out there practicing. I have a few books in my bookshelf about nonviolent communication. That's been a
Mm.
huge inspiration for me. And I think that is the main skill now. I mean, technically, there's so much you could have learned or not learned. Robots, AI will learn a lot, but when it comes to human conversation,
Right.
I think
Right.
nothing should replace that ever.
No. 100% agree. And I think the interesting thing, we just I just did a training in our community, the campus, around generative AI. And you know the idea was around how do we kind of take this 30,000 foot view from the airplane, from the sky, and then bring it down to a more practical application and understanding of, like, what does this really mean to me, like, as a senior retail leader, right? I get it. You can go to every conference and they're talking AI this, and check out, guest experience, loyalty programs, all these different things. But what does that really mean to me? And then the other thing that I really wanted to solve for, what does the conversation look like about AI, right, to my boss and my boss's boss, or to that person that's taking two buses or a train to work, right? Because they can honestly kind of care less, right? They're like, how, is this going to impact my paycheck? Okay, well, let's have a conversation about it. But at the end of the day, a lot of times, people don't really care. So I think we have to kind of thread this through this idea around being more empathetic. I think the conversations have to be, more empathetic around like where and meeting that person where they are, right? Because the tendency is that we want to have this kind of blanket conversation and communication. It's like I'm not there. I have no clue what you're talking about. I'm not there. But can we have a different conversation? Well, I don't know how to have a different conversation than there's this commercial that I love and I reference it so much. I think maybe I don't know if you and I had talked about this when there was these two consultants. They're sitting down with the CEO and they're telling the CEO, you should do this, you should do this, and you should do that, da da da. And the CEO's like, yeah, let's do it. And they're like, oh, we don't actually do it. We just we just have a conversation about it. I feel like there's so much of that taking place right now. Like, no,
Oh
we
yeah,
just tell you what to do, but we don't do it. What are your thoughts?
totally. Yeah. And I think that's the value of having the 360, a person going through the 360 with you. I think
Mm,
that is also part of the training for the companies, so that anyone who is the manager for anyone taking the 360 should also get some kind of training in how to have that conversation. For it needs to be 100% supportive at all times. It should be like, I'm your biggest supporter. I want you to succeed. I have this report now. This is the baseline. This is where we're at right now. So how do we move from here to wherever we want to go based on the strategy we have as a company, so on. So first part when you're designing a reality check is really
hmm
to understand what kind of a company do we aspire to be. What are the key behaviors that our leaders need to really embody, and then we create a reality check based on that. And again, we start doing this. First year, we might get 60-70% honesty. This is a lot of people worry about this, but people will never be honest. They will never tell the truth. And I'm like, why should they? Why should they believe in this? It's not they're not sure what's going to come out of it. But if you handle that 60-70% of honesty that you get year one, if you do that well and you listen and you take action, year two, that's going to be 70-80% honesty. And year three, you might have close to 100% honesty
mm,
in those
mm.
conversations. And that's when it turns really valuable. Yeah, thank you for showing the
Yeah.
website there. We came up with this interface. I'm very happy about it because for all of those of you listening, if you've had a 360 report, you know that it's a dense report. It's many pages.
hmm
And it's hard to know, am I doing well or not? So we came up with this algorithm that would kind of analyze all the individual answers to all the questions and tell you how well are you meeting expectations right now. You could have
Mm.
that number there, 52.
Yeah.
And we have this hypothesis. We would love to partner with people who could do some research on this. But what if you go down below 50? Perhaps that's a sign of stress. I still
Mm.
believe 52 could be a fairly how to say, critical number.
hmm
We also then break it down into the various stakeholder groups to know where are there potential conflicts and so on. But it's the first time I've seen something being summarized that could still hold some kind of value when it comes to 360 feedback. Because
Agreed.
just
Ag-
these reports, they're very valuable, but they're hard to read and hard to compare. And I think that's been one of the main issues we've been trying to address with the reality check.
Yeah. One, when we first had a conversation, I love the name, right? Because I think that's exactly what that's exactly what leaders need. It's a reality check. And the 360 feedback can, of course, I think over time has had negative connotations to it because I think we've had the conversation around when you're a lot of people are looking at the report, and they're looking at because the first thing that they do, they go to the comments, right? And then they can see Susie, who I just gave Susie some not so great feedback last week, and that's Susie's comment right there. And I think a lot of times they look at those comments and they think that's the totality of it. The one thing when we went through this the reality check. One, I love numbers, right? I love the idea of a score, and I know, some we're not talking about, we haven't been talking about the score per se, but I think the score. Those of you want to connect and set up a demo. The score is the starting point, right? It is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I went through this and I looked at it and I thought about it in the context of like, it is just the starting point. It's not the end all be all, but it actually helps you kind of steer the conversation, or gives you maybe the first spot or first place for you to actually start the conversation, and then you just never know what's going to actually transpire from that conversation, right? But once again, it actually takes some level of savviness to be able to have those conversations and just say, "Oh my gosh, 52. Well, why isn't it 68?" Well, you know what? Instead of like thinking about it that way, let's actually kind of drill down a little bit to understand maybe some of the fundamentals that kind of go into that number, and maybe some of the things that you are leveraging really well, maybe some of the things that you're not leveraging pretty well. When a company connects with you, and they want to have this conversation um with you, what are some of the things that you are looking for from a company that you want to actually work with?
Well, it's really about commitment to taking action on whatever data you're gathering. As you say, it's a starting point. So we're going to gather all that data. It's going to be super valuable. We're going to create some, very empathic feedback. We're going to have great conversations with them, where we kind of role model the kind of conversations they need to have
Hmm.
with the people around them. So it starts with us. We need to be great at that. But it's also to have an understanding for what we're trying to achieve here will take time. Are you committed to take that time? Can you see this as a 3-year project? Hopefully you're going to be in business for a long time. That's the aspiration, right? And how can you create the right circumstances for your leader and your people, because you could do this on any level really. What would be the value if everyone could come to their jobs and know that they were good enough?
Hmm.
What's going to happen in your organization? But for that to happen, you need to be brave. You need to take action, and you need to
Hmm.
show real vulnerability, and you need to listen in on the feedback.
Hmm.
I want to come back to my father. Another thing we have in common is we both cry when we watch Undercover Boss.
Yeah, you told me about the, yeah. Tell that story. Please tell that story. Please tell that story. Yes.
And my father, he doesn't really cry that often, but there's something with this very American show as well. You wouldn't have that in Sweden. But and it's always in this last moment, in the last 10 minutes, where the CEO would then invite the people he've met, and he would recognize them, and he would say, it was so valuable for me to see the challenges from your perspective. You opened my eyes to this and this and that. And that's because a lot of people have that frustration every day. They go to work, they try to do their best, and the company's just not supporting them in the right way. And in Undercover Boss, they they take that responsibility. They say, I'm sorry about that, and we're going to do something about it. And that's the moment when we cry. It's like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, now they see, now they understand. What if we could have that experience of feeling seen, valued?
Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
Ugh. I mean, a good way for us to close out is, you mentioned the word brave, and I love the fact that you mentioned that word, because I think everything around, taking an assessment, I think around actually being able to, as a company, first and foremost, you have to be brave, right? And, once again, you and I watch a lot of football. And, one of the things they would always say, and I never got it when I first started watching it, they would say, "Oh my gosh, he's really brave on the ball." And they were like, "Oh, he's taking responsibility." And I never really thought about it, because we don't use those words in American sports often. And I always would think about like, and it had to grow on me. It was like, yeah, he's actually brave. He's actually expressing himself. He's actually taking responsibility for the play, his play, the play of other people, all these different things. And so as a company, you need to be brave. You need to take responsibility. That understanding that this is not going to happen overnight. I know we live in a microwave society, right, and an AI society where everything needs to be so very, very quick. But if you really want to be around for a long time, you have to understand that this is going to take some time. When question I want to close with is that is really kind of like your roadmap, right? For for reality check, next 12 to 18 months. Like, what are some of the things that you are going to be going after, that you're really excited about?
Well, for us right now, it's been a tough time in terms of investment, because the
Hmm.
investment climate has been changing, so on, not only Sweden but globally. So for us, we're really happy that we have an MVP. I'm
Yeah.
super proud of seeing it being implemented. We have a group of consultants, mostly in Sweden right now, but I'd love to see this grow in other countries as well. Love to
Hmm.
work with you, Steve, to see how
Yeah.
we put this into practice for you. And I'm really looking for partnerships right now. That's really where we are. I believe we have a strong enough platform. We've proven that with the clients we had so far. But right now, we want to see more clients put this into their own businesses. Coaches like
Mm-hmm.
you are creating leadership development programs where you're finally actually able to measure the results,
Mm-hmm.
because you were doing some reference, to just go back to that. There are a lot of assessments out there. You could do the DISC, you could do the Myers-Briggs. You said it was very popular. I think it's great. But what they lack is a self-assessment.
Yeah.
So how I assess myself, well, that's interesting to me, and I can change my responses overnight. The important thing again is, how do I show up and how do people perceive me? And
Mm-hmm.
there is usually a lack between my image of myself and the image others hold of me. And that's the gift they can give me if they give me feedback. That's also a reality check, potential slap in the face for me whenever I'm out of touch with reality. And I might need that every now and then. So the 360s, I think, is, or the reality check as we call it, is a great tool to also right now evaluate all kinds of strategic initiatives that you have for your
Mm-hmm.
people when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to learning. Because it's not about them learning per se, reading a book. We know
Right.
that. It's
Right.
about the conversations you have, the emotions you create with the people, how effective you are in your meetings, how vulnerable you show up. And that we can measure with the reality check, which is
Yeah.
exactly what most companies now understand in terms of culture. So next 12 to 18 months, I'd love to see reality check being implemented in more countries, and then let's see where we develop from there.
Yeah, excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, I will make sure. I think everyone who's listening, whether you are listening to this on LinkedIn, or YouTube, Per-Erik's information is in the description. Please make sure you go ahead and connect with them and book a demo for it. I'm telling you, it is gonna change your entire perspective on how you see assessments, and then how you need to have a conversation, how the conversation actually needs to look different. Be brave on the ball. Be brave as a company. Understand that this is not going to happen in 6 months. It's not going to happen in 12. It is going to take some time. If you want to be one of those companies that want to be around, right, for years,
Mm.
right, you have to develop the culture. You have to move past the gatekeepers within your organization and allow the feedback to actually land, and to actually land appropriately to the right person and have the right conversations as well. I got to have you back because, I will have you back because, one of the other things, and I didn't want to bring it up because we would go another half an hour, is our mutual love for the Enneagram. So we will not,
Mm.
we will put I will put a pin in that, and that will like be a little teaser for everyone else as for our next time together as well too. So um you know what, I want you to leave, leave leave this with maybe just a statement or something like that for companies. I talked a little bit about it, but I think it's better coming from you, the founder and CEO of Reality Check. And what are some of the things that they need to kind of think about? Just give them kind of a closing statement, and we'll move forward.
No pressure there, eh?
No, I know, right? We didn't plan this one.
Just, ask yourself, how far would you go? Would you be able to go if all the people in your company would know their value, would know that they are more than a paycheck, and that you value their commitment, their loyalty, and the way they show up? What if people could come to their work knowing that value, feeling confidently that they are appreciated? Where will that take you? So I'm going to end with a question.
Mm. Ooh, okay, see, that's exactly why I did that, because I knew it was going to be awesome. I knew it was going to be awesome. So, thank you, Per-Erik. I appreciate you. Safe travels. I know you're about to, say you're going down to, no, where, Colombia? No,
Colombia.
yeah,
Yeah.
Colombia, right? Okay, so safe travels. Bring me back some coffee or something like that, or whatever. As well. Oh,
Not
your
whatever.
homework.
I'll bring
What's
you
your
coffee.
What's your homework? What's your homework? Well, you got,
Hector Camacho. I need to check him out. Yeah,
there
definitely.
you go, and shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Go ahead and stay in the background for a second. I'm going to close this out. All right.
Thank you so much.
Um, yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for just kind of having a peek into our conversation. We had all these questions and different things that we wanted to cover, but honestly, we covered them all. And I really hope you were able to get a good perspective around the idea around assessments, the importance of assessments, but more importantly, the role that you play as a leader. Right? We can put everything we want on the companies, but when it comes to the individual leader, you need to understand and learn how to have a conversation around around what the assessment actually is, around your ability to make sure that that person is seen continuously. Continuously. That requires you to be brave. That requires for you to take responsibility, not just for yourself, but for your team. So let's make sure as leaders, we are taking responsibility. Make sure that you're being brave. So thank you. I will see you next Monday. We will continue our conversations. We'll be talking about performance reviews next Monday morning at 8 o'clock on Win Your Week with Steve Worthy. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day, and God bless.